Hey guys, to help run the forums, host the website, and travel, we've introduced a universal service fee for in-depth coverage, including this video. My goal is to be unbiased and transparent. It's a privilege to serve you. This is not an endorsement. Let's get into it. Well, we were taking a ride around Long Beach area. We found the LA River Trail.
Yeah.
And this is the Nevo GX.
Rohloff,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, the GX is wider tires and kind of cross-country or
yeah, so
extreme.
any G model has a wider tire, which most bikes now with Riese Müller are available with the G model.
Mm-hmm.
And then the GX is kind of like grand crossover, so it's kind of that like on-off-road sort of setup.
Yeah.
It has the knobby tires, and it's really set up to handle a lot.
It's really exciting to see a bike like this that's approachable with the step-thru. Stiff, because Riese Müller they really build like tough bikes that are reinforced. I'm not getting a lot of frame flex, and we've got the mid-motor, the mid-mounted battery, power tube, really beautiful design.
Oh, yeah.
It's approachable, but then it's also got things like this front rack, right? It only carries about 6.6 pounds, 3 kilograms, but you could put a sleeping bag on that, and you could put some extra gear and take this on like an adventure ride. Same thing back here. We got the Bibia rubber strap bands. I really like those. That's something I've only seen on Riese Müller bikes. And then 40 pounds. And this has the MIK compatible like rack interface. Can you describe that a little bit? What does that mean?
So MIK, most people might be familiar with the rack time compatible mounts, which were used previously on a lot of the Riese Müller bikes.
Yeah.
But because Riese Müller designs their own rack, and they wanted to find a system that really works with their rack. The Rack Time was saying, they just want them only if they want to be able to make the rack for them, but they wanted to do their own design. MIK is more of an open source solution. It's cool. A newer technology, and I think we're going to start to see more of it.
I hope at least in the States we do, because a lot of these cool accessories, they're only in Europe, it feels like. Even the Cellar Royale stuff, they got this little plug here we can put lights on, and I never see accessories for that around here.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately we've been able to find different partners to work with for that stuff. The MIK is a product that's produced by Basel, and basically they're distributed by Hawley, so they do have a distributor in the US. Similarly, Rack Time now is distributed by JB Importer. So bike shops do have this now accessible, where previously it wasn't as accessible. But these parts are much more common on e-bikes, and as the e-bike thing is growing, I think these distributors are starting to recognize the need for that stuff.
I'm glad we're catching up. Coming back to these bikes being really purpose-built, whether it's the frame, having motor integration, and now battery integration. In this case, electronic shifting with the Rohloff E-14. We're going to get into that in a minute, but if you look at these tires again, they have those knobs, and they've got these 65 millimeter wide fenders that are really well attached, like in multiple places. They don't rattle around a whole lot. You've got 70 millimeters of suspension. This is an air fork, so it can be sagged a little bit depending on your body weight. It's got a compression and rebound adjust down here. So it's just a really good setup. Magura MT4 hydraulic disc brakes, 180 millimeter rotors down here, and you can see the big dual piston calipers. Do a great job. You want to be able to stop when you're on a little bit heavier bike. I think this one's about 63 pounds if you have the single battery option. If you add a second battery, which is possible,
that's right.
That's about 5.7 pounds. The power tube batteries, they weigh about like 6.3, so they are slightly heavier. And the shielding design here that Riese Müller has gone with is like this rubberized, really nice, so it's not going to get nicked up and stuff, which I definitely appreciate. Their paint jobs are always, I don't know, artistic comes to mind, because it's like minimal design work on it, and they try to have these like strong, bold, sort of solid looks in terms of paint. This one does come in 4 colors, so we got the pearl white over here, as well as this kind of, I call it sort of a gray, and then they have metallic red. And while we're over here on this one, Chris, this one doesn't have the knobby tires. This one has the Schwabe Big Bend Plus, also has puncture protection. This one has the reflective sidewalls. So there's some similarities, but what are we looking at here? This one seems to have like the NuVinci,
So
or the Enviolo, or what's
this is called the GH Vario, and this is a small size, so it comes with a 26-inch wheel.
Oh.
Now the Vario now comes with Enviolo. So Enviolo uses the NuVinci technology. The company has made some changes internally, and they changed their name to for the bike side to Enviolo, and so that's what we're seeing here. The shifter is a little bit different.
Yeah, the infographic where you see the guy like, are you flat or are you climbing a hill? It's kind of fun.
That's right. Yeah, and I think they do some custom work with Riese Müller as well, because they're actually their largest customer in the world.
What? So Riese Müller is the largest like e-bike NuVinci customer for the world?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we see that in the shop as well. It's quite popular. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on now with the Rohloff E-14.
Yeah.
A little bit pricier of a upgrade to still have that internal hub and a belt drive. But, you know, here we get a much wider range and some really interesting technology.
So what I'm hearing you say is, like, first of all, this bike that we're looking at, like, as shown, is 7100. We're kind of carrying that. I was like, is it 6999? No, it's 7099. And then if you upgrade and you do the dual battery, it's like
8150.
8150, right? So about $1,000 extra, which is in my opinion, it's like it's kind of a little bit more than just buying a second battery pack. But they do have to add the wiring and the mount and stuff, so that's probably part of it.
Right. It's a real cost of what it costs for those additional parts and battery and everything.
But then you extend the range, and back to that adventure platform, you still get the standover, like, much lower. There's so many cool accessories with that, including the thud buster here. We've got the Cane Creek. This is short travel, so they call it the ST. The saddles are slightly different. We might go into this bike at some point in the future, but I just wanted to point out that if you do want that smaller size, they do have it, just not in the GX
Not
roll-off.
in the GX. The GX is only in the 47 or 58. 47 or 56.
That's right.
Centimeter.
Great memory. He's full of great information. I had no idea the Enviolo.
Yeah.
Am I saying that right? Cool. That they were doing that. While we're on the topic of wheels, I want to come down here and just do a close-up on these. These are 27.5 by 2.35, so they're a little bit wider than normal. They are tubeless easy or ready, so basically with these rims and these tires you could go tubeless to save some weight and do lower tire pressure. It's already got a decent range. This is a 25 to 50 psi, so it's like actually 23. I was mistaken there. And then we've got the reinforcement eyelets on this rim. It's just a little bit wider, black spokes, everything, even the fork. This is an SR Suntour fork, but you don't see a ton of branding, and you have these extra reflectors and stuff, so it's nicer. All their stuff tends to look really nice. Integrated lights here. So this is Busch Müller IQX, 150 lux, and it's sort of aimed down a little bit. There's like a cut at the top, so it's not going to blind oncoming traffic, which is really nice. Through axle in the front, 15 millimeter, but otherwise just standard 100 millimeter hub spacing with quick release, and quick release on the back too, which is neat because a lot of times with internally geared hubs and stuff, you don't have that. You have like nuts. But this one, it appears to just have like 135 millimeter hub spacing with 9 millimeter axle quick release skewer. So that's interesting. So if you were out on like an adventure ride and you needed to perform some trail maintenance and maybe change a flat or something, or maybe fix your wheel, true it or something, you could. You wouldn't, come on, like we're probably going to have like a little tool with us, but I think that's kind of a neat call out because it just makes it more adventure ready. It reminds me of like a mountain bike. Like this is part mountain bike, but also really, it's accessorized for the city with the lights and stuff. We got an integrated backlight.
Bike, right?
Go anywhere.
Yeah.
Adventure bike. So the other call outs while we're on it, adjustable length pressure kickstand, and we did adjust it. I try to stand the bikes up really straight to do the photos and stuff. And then we've got the Cellar Royale. This is the gel saddle. It's got these nice like rugged sides, because a lot of times your bike, if it is going to tip, you kind of scrape your saddle up and rip the leather or whatever. In this case, it's more of a plastic or a rubber. And then check out these grips. These are the GP3s from Ergon, so they have that adjustable sort of like bar end or bullhorn. Really nice. So ergonomic. You got multiple hand positions, so if you're going the distance, maybe you got that second battery pack, which by the way, it would be right here. I'm going to do a little overlay because we did look at the Homage the other day and it had the dual battery set up.
That's right.
And someone asked a really good question. I thought this was great. We should have mentioned it in that other one, but we're doing it now. You can ride this with just the power tube or just the power pack. So maybe you're traveling and sometimes it's hard to take, or you really can't fly with lithium-ion batteries. but Bosch is so widespread. Almost every city has like some sort of dealer or what. I'm really overreaching here. Not every city, but a lot of the major cities, and a lot of people, if they're going to have a battery, they're going to have a Bosch power pack, whether it's 400 or 500. Both would work with that if you got the dual battery option. So you could travel with this bike, use like bike flights or something, get the bike to your location, and then you could borrow or rent a power pack, and you could ride the bike with your friends or something. You know, I think that's a really cool scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense. The one thing I will mention is sometimes the charging, you have to have both the batteries. Depending on the setup, different configurations, the charging port will be only from one point. So just something important to notice.
And probably power tube, right? Because that's the default. Like right now we only have power tube and it obviously works. This is the charging port. So if we had...
On this one, actually, when you put the power pack ends up being here, so you still have that really low entry and have that space down here. So the power pack is up here.
Yep.
And then the actual charging port is on the side of the power pack in that example. Whereas, some of the other models, it actually switches. And
in either scenario, you can charge the packs off the bike too. So you could just like take it off, take it maybe inside if you live somewhere where it's extremely hot or cold during the day or night. That's hard on batteries. It's a good idea to keep them between like 20 and 80%, ideally like right in the middle, especially if you aren't using it for a long time. Chris, can you show like the battery removal if I'm on this side? And
yeah, sure.
Because this is kind of cool, you guys. Like there's the locking core. They do a really good job. This is an ABIS cylinder, same thing as the cafe lock in the back. So they're key to like, you don't have to have multiple keys, which I really appreciate. This is the Shield 5650, just for quick stops. It's a heavy bike, so you know, is someone gonna try to like pick the bike up and run away? Especially if you're at the shop, probably not.
I'm gonna twist it, unlock it. Yeah. It doesn't drop by default. It has this kind of safety mechanism in it. So at this point it's unlocked, but you actually will need to push this in order to really release the battery. So once the battery's released, you can pull it out.
Okay.
And you have the power pack. As you see, this kind of has this proprietary shield on here from Riese Müller, and that's the setup. So if you were to get another battery or something like that, you could
swap the shields.
Swap the shield out.
Can I see this, Chris? Just want to get a close-up. It does have the charge level indicator with 5 ticks right there. There's the charging port we were talking about. And yeah, I don't know how much weight this shield adds. Sometimes it's not a lot when it's sort of plasticky, but I have seen some, like Trek has the big handle kind of thing. It adds significant weight. So this is a neat design they've got here. I feel like it's pretty well protected, especially when you got the fender and that rubber shield, and then shops would have access to the internals here. Riese Müller, along with Bosch, provide this 2-year comprehensive warranty, which is great. And then I think it's 5 years on the frame. You know, you're paying a little bit of a premium. These are some of the nicer products. And, you know, Riese Müller's been in business doing this for quite a while. They're a leader. When you heard Chris talking about like the relationship with NuVinci, he started off with these guys, I don't know, how many years has it been now? Couple years?
It's like 3 years now.
3 years, yeah. Congrats, because you know this is a relationship that's new to the U.S. in a lot of ways, and they're partnering with select dealers who do a good job, and you know, they are more expensive. And one of the question marks is sort of like, well, you have to wait usually if you want it customized, and they have so many options. We talked about the frame sizes, the frame colors, the drivetrain. You know, whether it's the Enviolo or the, you know, Rohloff. Does this also come with like a cassette option too?
It is available in that configuration.
A little bit lighter if you wanted to.
So the touring, yeah, with the derailleur and cassette.
Okay. Well, I want to get to that in just a second. The Bosch Performance Line CX motor is like the high torque mountain motor, and it has EMTB mode, which is pretty cool. So up to 75 Newton meters of torque. It's measuring your rear wheel speed with this little magnet and a sensor here. It's measuring your pedal cadence and your pedal torque over 1,000 times per second. And the integration here isn't quite as beautiful as like some of the Bulls bikes or high bikes I've seen, where they tip the battery or they tip the motor up into the frame a little bit more, and it might raise the ground clearance and stuff. But they might not be quite as rigid as a bike like this, where you can see the tubes are just like directly welded here. I'm kind of fine with it. The performance is good, and they also lower that front like chain ring or belt ring in this case, so they both pass below these seat stay, chain stay bar here. So that's part of what allows you to have a belt. And this is the CDX from Gates Carbon Drive. So it's got that center track design. It's not going to come off either side. You've got a little chain ring guard alloy, so that's going to keep your pants or skirt from rubbing on the belt. Just really quiet, really reliable. They tend to last longer than chains and require less maintenance because you don't have a derailleur hanging down. So it's very tough as well. And I believe back here we've got a 20-tooth cog, and then up here it's 22 teeth. But then when we come back to, this is the E-14 from Rohloff. I think it was like 523 degrees, or what was
526?
Oh, so close.
Yeah,
that's huge. For a second, for context, they have the new, what is it, a SRAM Eagle, where it's like 10 teeth up to 50. That's 500 degrees. So this is 526. That's awesome. That's a really wide range of gears. That's like having a big, saucer cassette or sprocket and then a tiny one. That means you can climb with this thing. You can hit and maintain higher top speeds. Let's say if you get the HS version, which is a speed pedelec.
That's right. Yeah.
Goes up to 28 miles per hour. This one's class 1, just a standard 20 mile per hour or 25 kilometers per hour, depending on if you're in Europe or whatnot. So I think it's really cool that you have a drivetrain that matches it, but it's a 1x, so you don't have like additional chain rings up front. And really, Bosch only does 1x systems. So that's cool. What else can you tell us? Some of the trade-offs here. This is kind of expensive. It adds a little bit of weight, maybe more than a cassette and derailleur. You do have this electronic, probably servo situation going on down here, but I think that's pretty well protected, especially with the kickstand here, not quite as exposed as a derailleur. Just tell me more about the Rohloff E-14.
Yeah, so the Rohloff E-14 was released last year.
2017.
2017, and Riese Müller decided to just spec it on only one bike as kind of a test project to some extent. So they did it on the mountain version, and they had a lot of success with it, and ultimately they decided to spec it on all of their Rohloff bikes. They switched from the traditional mechanical to E-14, so it's a pretty big deal, and it shows a pretty big commitment to that
and confidence in the product.
That product. And yeah, so they work really closely with Rohloff. Rohloff's also a German company. It's handmade in Germany. And between Riese Müller, Rohloff, and Bosch, they've been able to really develop a system that works really well for their bikes, and overall is that. So the E-14, basically what it does, it adds that electronic shifting element. It communicates with the Bosch system. So basically when the system is shifting, it tells the motor to actually stop powering.
I felt that. It's like the shift detection thing. So
exactly. So instead of the standard shift detection, which you will find on a derailleur version, which is actually based on sensors, in this case it's actually based on an electronic signal coming from the hub system. So the hub tells the motor, stop for a moment, I'm going to shift, and then it continues once the shift is complete. You can shift up to 3 times. You can shift 3 gears at one time.
Whoa. I was messing with that. Click, click, click. It was pretty fast.
If you hold it down, it will do 3 at a time, and then just keep on doing 3 at a time so you're all the way at the top or the bottom, whatever the case may be.
Nice.
And then some other cool things, like when you come to a stop, it will shift down to.
We did that.
You can set it up to whatever your preference is.
So let me talk about that for a second. Like sometimes you're going fast, you're pedaling in a high gear, and you're having fun, and it's great. But then, gotta stop. Maybe unexpectedly, someone runs out in the street or something like that. You slow down. When you stop, because the Bosch system is measuring your wheel speed, they're like, they stopped. It automatically will shift down to a gear that you choose. So I was gonna go to 1, and Chris was like, maybe try 3 or 4, and that good choice, because I'm a somewhat stronger rider, and then when you've got the motor support, it's pretty easy to start. So that's nice. You don't have to press the buttons quite as frequently, and we're going to get up there and show that. But how quickly are the shifts on this thing?
Yeah, so I believe it's 180 milliseconds. So I was actually doing a little research and trying to get an understanding of how fast some of the shifts are on a traditional derailleur or whatever the case may be. I wasn't able to get too much info. Maybe we can measure that at some point. But
just getting some nice wildlife out here, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
This is neat. We are on an adventure, right, you guys? So I'm gonna jump up to the front, but I want to complain about some stuff for a second. No bottle cage bosses. not the end of the world. I mean, there's room here for one of those like aftermarket anywhere adapters possibly, but I just feel like Riese Müller, you don't have to put like a bottle cage on it. That could be left up to the user, and they could put like a folding lock or something. However, imagine you've got that second battery, which kind of comes like right here. You still have a low standover height, but then maybe it really wouldn't make sense. I don't know where else to put a bottle cage. And they do have saddle adapters, but Chris has talked about how those could kind of get bumped, and I've experienced swinging my leg over, not only hitting a rack, but definitely snagging on like bottle cages. They have a lot of trunk bags where you can put a bottle in the back of it. And depending on your situation, there's handlebar mounts. There are options, but they didn't have bottle cage bosses. So I wanted to be fair and kind of call that out. Also, this front rack, I like that it's suspended along with the light. So the light isn't like down here. It's not going to collide with the rack. It's not going to bounce up and down because it's suspended. It's not down here on the lowers. And it's also not going to be blocked by cargo on the front rack. But this rack steers when you turn, okay? It's not like mounted to the head tube. So when I do this, see, it turns with me. And if you had heavier stuff on there, it might, kind of dump to the side like that and spill your drinks or whatever. So to me, that's like it's a minor thing. I've seen other companies that just have bolts on their frame and the rack mounts to there. But I think in the case of like a bike packing or an adventure, you might have lightweight stuff up here, like the sleeping bag or, mattress pad or something like that. Those are the big things for me. I mean, obviously it's a higher priced product. It takes a little bit longer. There's a couple little things, but there's just so many choices here. It's neat to have that many drivetrain options. It's nice to have good customer support, a good shop experience if you live near a shop. But they're expanding. How many shops do you think Riese Müller has now that we're in late 2018 in the US?
Sure, exactly over 20 or so.
Okay.
Currently, and I think they'll be growing some more this year as well.
Okay. Before we get into the display, Chris, is there anything you feel like I missed or that you want to talk about a little bit more?
Yeah, not too much. I guess you did mention the frame lock as well, right? With it?
Yeah, the cafe lock or the frame lock is a nice little accessory. Because one of the other ones, the Homage that we were looking at, it came with like a folding lock.
Right.
That was an alarm lock, in fact. That was pretty cool.
That's right.
Oh, and actually, we should talk about the differences. Like, if you got this in a high-speed version,
right,
the lights might be upgraded a little bit, and they have like brake switches, so when you pull the brakes, it actually sends a signal on the rear light, goes bright. That is not the case here. Also, maybe the rotors would be slightly different on the brakes. And then these ones only come with the Enviolo display, right? Regardless?
That's correct, yeah. The Nevo is only spec'd with the Enviolo display.
And this is a Snapshot, you guys. Like, these guys are always updating stuff. It's definitely like an iterative and really neat to see them because this is built to order. There are times as well where like a drivetrain system, maybe they'll swap it out for the next version, or maybe they'll be out of stock on one. So, you kind of work with your dealer to set up and get whatever you can. I'm trying to be as thorough as possible because this is just such a cool platform. Like, I really like this one. It's definitely more. Can you remind me how much the Homage was that we were looking at the other day? Or kind of the price range, Chris?
Well, it depends. In a similar spec bike, you're probably looking at about $1,000 more for
to get the rear suspension.
Right.
And I like that. I like having rear suspension, but when you get the higher volume tires like this, especially knobby, this is still very, very comfortable for me, and that's a big thing for me. A part of that is because it's got that Thudbuster ST I was talking about. This is 31.6 millimeter diameter, and it works with I think it's 39.4, or is it
34.9?
I just get it backwards. Yeah, 34.9 millimeter. That's Riese Müller have these bigger seat tubes, and I think that's part of the thickness and strength.
This is 40 millimeters actually. So this clamp is actually 40 millimeters, which is one of the largest that's out there, really.
And then they just use a shim, like see that metal internal thing, so they were able to adapt it to work with the Thudbuster. But this almost feels like a full suspension ride. Just because of all those comfort touch points, and then the Ergotech stem is kind of aimed up. This is level 5, so it's meant to be a little bit sturdier. I think, does it go from 1 to 6?
Up to 6 is the highest, and 5 and 6 are generally what you'll find on e-bikes, especially this caliber. Very
cool, man. Very cool. Well, I'm gonna jump in and do the display now. So this uses one of my favorite displays. I think my absolute favorite now is the Kiox from Bosch, because it's color and magnetic and everything, but this has all the most important features. When you're ready and you've got the bike all charged up, you just press this power button here for a second. It's grayscale. It is backlit. You're not going to see that because it's so bright right now, but it's like a faint white. Up top, there are actually 2 arrows. You can't see them, but that shift recommendation, which you can turn on or off. And that gives you some idea of like, hey, you could be a little bit more efficient because you're spinning too fast or maybe too slow. Why don't you shift up or shift down? That's kind of neat. Got a battery infographic with 5 bars, so 20% increments. There's room for improvement there, and that's where the kiosk has stepped things up. They have a battery percentage with like an infographic that's really, it doesn't use bars, it uses like pixels, which is pretty cool. And then we've got assist level right here. So right now it's an off, but if I press plus or minus, we can go to Eco, Tour. It says Sport, but really this is EMTB, and you can see that at the bottom. EMTB is 120 to 300% output. So it's kind of like, don't worry about what level, just pedal, and based on how hard you pedal, the bike will respond naturally. So that's the mountain bike specific like drive mode that Bosch introduced a couple of years ago. Right. A few years ago. It's pretty neat to see. And it seems like if you're buying a Riese Müller bike, your 2 motor choices are like the CX and the high speed. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. They do have one model that they're introducing this year with the Active Plus motor.
Is this a secret?
On the Roadster.
You're not allowed to talk about this?
No, it's the Roadster. They're going to do with the Active Plus.
I like
in
that
one
one.
version. Yeah, they'll do with another internal hub, the Shimano Alpine internal hub.
It's a lightweight bike. We looked at it in Brooklyn last year. So Chris is moving, expanding, I guess, because you still have the New York store, but Long Beach is like the new location, which I'm a fan of, because in the winter, this is where I've reviewed in the cold, rain, snow, whatever in New York. This is where it's at, and I'm thankful for that. So coming back to the display, there's a little power meter right next to the assist level. So it kind of surges based on how hard the motor's working. Speed, it's in miles per hour, but we can switch to kilometers per hour if we want. Down here we have a bunch of other readouts. Right now it's range, but if I press the I here or here, it cycles through. We get odometer, gear. So that's talking about the roll-off. So Chris was talking about how they're integrated. We got a plus and minus over here, and there's an M on the bottom, but I don't think that's really used in this configuration. If I press that button, listen to this. You can hear it. You can shift it standstill. So that's what's so cool. That's how it can automatically shift down when you stop if you set it up that way. Or maybe you stopped and you manually shift. That's kind of neat compared to like traditional derailleur where you kind of can't. So they're really building, these things feel like cars in a lot of ways, which is cool. So there's gear, and then you'll only see that if you get the roll-off version, not the Enviolo or derailleur version. Trip distance. By the way, you can hold reset to clear your trip distance. Clock, max speed, you can also clear that. 19.6, baby. So that's really, the Bosch motor gets almost to 20. Average speed, trip time, range. And range is really cool because it's dynamic. So back to if we press the plus or minus, let's go all the way up to turbo. Based on the last mile of riding, it says, if you keep riding like this, you got 15 more miles with this battery. And the battery is not full right now. We're at like, 3 out of 5 bars. But let's go all the way to Eco. So Eco is like the most gentle, it's kind of the minimal 40 Newton meters of torque versus up to 75. Now we get 48 miles of range. That's pretty phenomenal. And of course you can ride this just like a bike in off mode, which is great. And then range is like infinite because it's, maybe you need to eat a hamburger or something along the way, a salad. Walk mode up here at the top. So if we press that, you have to be in one of the different levels of assist, and then it says walk assist. So then we can hold plus and the bike will push itself. That could be useful in situations where you get a flat tire, or maybe you're in a park or somewhere where it's not appropriate to ride your bike. So I love that they've left that enabled for the US. And then we have the light button. So I'm gonna press that for a second. Lights on right there, and then show you guys what this looks like. It's a bright day, so but you get the idea. We got that backlight. Again, no brake lights in this configuration, just a couple LEDs that are more constant. And then if you want, you can hold reset and I simultaneously. Check this out, configuration. So we can set the clock. I'm gonna hit I to the next menu. Wheel circumference, English, or you can change languages, Dutch, Japanese maybe, Chinese, I don't know. That's a dangerous one, I'm gonna keep going. Units, so that's where we change to kilometers or miles. Time format, 24. Shift recommendation, that's the arrows we talked about. Power on, hours. start gear. So this is the one I really wanted to get to. That's when it automatically shifts to roll-off back down, and I chose 4, and I'm pretty happy with that decision. And then there's some other readouts here about like the display version, software version, battery, and when you're done with this, just hold reset, and we're out. I'm stoked. I'm excited to go for a ride. Before we do, is there anything else you want to say about this thing, man?
No, I think let's do it. I'm super stoked about this bike, and overall, I think it's going to be a really popular one.
Yeah, I agree. Last year when we were reviewing Riese Müller models for the first time, I forget where we started, and I think we interviewed Heiko from the company, came over from Germany, had that little get together, and people were like, really excited about the Nevo.
Oh yeah.
And I think also, was it the Charger or something too?
The Charger and the Nevo are two of Riese Müller's more popular models, without a doubt. And I think the Nevo is really catching up there. And I think this year it's going to be interesting to see what goes on there.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to just stow that kickstand. Love that it stays out of the way. These are not my favorite pedals, to be honest with you. They're just cage style alloy. They're small. I would get some like BMX, like bigger ones, just because I don't even have that big of feet, but they make me feel a little bit more confident. You can get pedal strikes though with the larger pedals. I'm gonna take it up to sport or EMTB mode. That's my personal favorite, and then I'll just start pedaling. Super fast. These Bosch motors are just like very responsive. Bike feels pretty stable with those larger tires and everything. Might shift some gears here. There we go. And it's so cool to see the gear readout on the display. So as I'm shifting, it takes me away from the range menu, and it shows me the gear. So I think that's great. It's an awesome, I don't necessarily always want to see what gear it is just like while I'm riding. I want to know the range or my speed or whatever else. Maybe my max speed if I'm trying to hit like a new record. But being able to see the gear just for a moment, just so I'm like, oh, okay, I'm at the top, or maybe I've got a little bit more to go. That's nice. And then there's the shift recommendation arrows. I'm gonna try to get those to fire for you. See how there's that up arrow right there? That's the shift recommendation that we were talking about before. And now we're at like 20.5 miles per hour, so the motor is not helping anymore. One other thing I want to call out about the Bosch system, performance line motors support you up to 120 rotations per minute. That's like pedal rotations. It just means you can spin a little bit faster, which is very nice. As someone with like a sensitive knee and maybe more of a road biking background, I like to be able to, maybe you're coming up to a hill and you downshift, so you're getting ready to climb. Well, that makes your pedal rotations per minute, your pedal speed goes up. And if the motor drops on you, you've got to like shift down again, and it's this like feedback loop that's kind of no fun. So I really like the performance line motors, but they are a little bit heavier. They do use power a little bit faster. So those are the trade-offs. About 8.8 pounds on that motor right there. Okay guys, the idea here is you can see the belt, listen to the motor, maybe listen for the fenders a little bit, and just anything else. I'm gonna go mostly on road, but do a little bit of off-road. I really love how stiff this bike is and how quiet it is. Just the belt is clean, it's tight, the fenders are really well done. SKS does a great job. And I did notice on the 26-inch wheel size for the smaller bike we were looking at, that one seemed to have Kirana like alloy plastic fenders. So they're slightly different, but I think a lot of them are gonna come with these plastic ones. Let's do it. And I am still in EMTB mode. Nice. I could hear it like it shifts down, and that is such a cool feature. I also want to call out this nice back paint. Like, it seems to protect the light color portion of the frame really well, and it matches this alloy plate. There's just a lot of little like refinements here that are neat. I don't see that on other e-bikes. They don't have like two different styles of paint, like one that's texturized like this, and that's really cool. It's a pretty good setup. We've been out cruising around town, and I thought this was a beautiful place to kind of trade off with Chris and get some third-person shots. He's on the GX Rohloff, and that is the Queen Mary in the background over there. Long Beach is a beautiful place, man.
Yeah, for sure.
We're gonna take off, and
let's do it.
Here we go. I've got the frame shots that I always do, and you hear the motor, you hear the zipping sound, but when you're actually riding like this, you really don't hear the motor too much, especially if you're in a more relaxed pedal cadence. Beautiful bike path. Just a beautiful day to go for a ride. But we do have the fenders and the lights for, safety, or if it rains or something. These are really built to kind of go anywhere and handle anything. I think that's about it, you guys. It's been fun cruising around town and seeing the sights and stuff. I always really enjoy this. Chris, thank you so much for your expertise.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, and letting me sleep in your guest room. That's part of this, you guys. It makes it possible. And I do my best to visit different shops and travel around. But I'm trying to cover these Riese Müller bikes kind of hot off the presses here from Interbike. It's a real privilege. I'll have all the details and specs back at the website, ElectricBikeReview.com. And maybe I'll see you hanging out in the forums. You can share your experience with this or other Riese Müller products. Have fun out there. Ride safe.